I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week, we're going to be looking at the sort of clear frontrunners of the race, but the main topic of the show is going to be the best director predictions. So we're finally rounding out sort of the above the line categories before we jump into more of the technical categories. But if you're new to the show, what I do every single week is I look at a category of the Oscars for the 2020 nominations. I predict what I think is going to get nominated. I like to keep you guys updated on the other award shows as we start coming over these next couple of weeks. I'm going to start, as things like the Golden Globes come out or other industry nominations, I'm going to be talking about those and dedicating certain sections of the show completely to that, as well as predictions for those categories and reactions to them as well. Along with sort of the Oscar nominations predictions, sometimes I'll double them up in the upcoming weeks as we get closer and closer to nominations. I'll have to start grouping categories. For example, next week is going to be Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Original Screenplay. So I'm going to start grouping things together. But for right now, I like to do a general topic. This week is going to be clear frontrunners, people that I think are going to get nominated for sure, and right now actually are in the lead by a good chance. That's what's so fun about the Oscar race, though, is that my clear frontrunners could not even get nominated because things are so unpredictable. But I try to use my analysis, my knowledge and experience based on about 70% accuracy on all 3 years that I've done this, to give you guys the most up-to-date and all the information necessary, which is why I make these videos so long. But what I also like to do, keeping you updated every single week, is at the top of the show doing a series of rising movies and falling movies, discussing at the top of the show what movies, whether they're coming out at the box office, whether they've been nominated at certain award shows or have been left out in certain things, movies that are rising and doing well, or movies that have just been falling out of the Oscar race because my Best Picture nominations have been a month old. So those predictions, I look back at them now, I'm like, maybe I make some adjustments because the Oscar race is always changing. But without further ado, jumping over into this week's rising film, we're going to be looking at Ford V Ferrari. It recently has come out at the box office this past weekend. I saw it and was really impressed by it. It's a film that is definitely a crowd pleaser. It's been called old-fashioned and traditional. I think those are sort of just words for good and sort of simple storytelling, but effective. But not necessarily a boring version. I think it's incredibly exhilarating, incredibly interesting. I was a fan of it, and I think the audiences have been a fan of it too. It's got a great critical response, currently standing at a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has an A+ cinema score and did well at the box office, coming at number one, beating Charlie's Angels with about a $29 million to $30 million opening weekend, which is really a huge deal for this kind of movie because a lot of people were maybe predicting that this wouldn't do so well. It's definitely a risky movie to do because it's a $100 million sports drama for adults. It's not an IP. As a matter of fact, it beat an intellectual property name in Charlie's Angels. It's just a sort of a really great movie with sort of movie star led that everyone seems to enjoy, and it seems to be doing well at the box office. So in terms of the Oscars, how that would relate would be that either it's doing really well at the box office and therefore it's getting a lot of love and the Oscars want to reward that, or the studio, I believe it's Warner Brothers, is happy enough with the film and is sort of just, they're happy with the box office results. It's probably going to make money back on its investment, which is, it would have been kind of risky for a $100 million sports drama, but seems to have done well. So there's that aspect. So they may just like the box office and they don't want to campaign for the Oscars, or they use this box office as sort of a leveraging tool to say, look how many people loved it and nominate us for the Oscars. Ford V Ferrari is a movie that sort of has been falling out by expectations out of the festivals, as other movies, especially something like Little Woman or Bombshell, have sort of started to creep up and maybe take its slot in something like Best Picture. It's also going to hurt its chances that I don't think both Matt Damon and Christian Bale are campaigning for Best Lead Actor. Therefore, in my estimation, neither of them will probably be get nominated. So you're missing out on the acting support. You're going to get some technical stuff, but you're going to have to beat out another film that most likely will have technical support and no acting support, which will be something like 1917, which comes out later this year. So it's definitely hard to judge as of right now if it does slip into that top 10. Overall, I think it will get multiple nominations, but maybe not Best Picture. If they maybe extend it to maybe 10, I could see a chance of it getting in, but for right now, it's still on the cusp despite doing so well but this could be a movie that's on, like I said, on the rise and really gets those nominations. Then jumping over into our falling category, I'm going to look at Cats. Recently, there was an IndieWire article that came out discussing how Cats is maybe not going to be ready to meet a lot of awards deadlines. The New York Film Critics Association reached out to them to see, would they get the film before their final voting close, which is early December, but December the 4th. And the assumption was sort of no, that they're aiming for a mid-December finish. Now, this would be significant because it would also miss out on the Globes, the Golden Globes deadline. There's always a deadline for the members to see the movie, then they have to vote, and then the nominations come out, and then, of course, the ceremony. I think the Cats would actually do pretty well at the Globes. It's because of the comedy musical category. It would fit in there in generally a weaker year. So, I never thought Cats would be an Oscar play. It can be theoretically. It could sort of come out and really be amazing, and Oscar voters would want to reward it. But based on the trailer and based on sort of the visual effects, it's sort of a weirder film. If it doesn't make that Golden Globes deadline, though, it could still happen. They could still sort of rush it and finish it earlier. But if it doesn't meet that Golden Globes deadline, that could really hurt the film in terms of getting the Oscar nominations, because now we'll have no precursors, and assuming it doesn't get, it may actually qualify for something like SAG Action Ensemble, but probably not acting ensemble. Probably won't get any of the actors. And then that's sort of the momentum builds. If it doesn't get in Globes and doesn't get into the industry awards, it's going to be hard for it to get into any Oscars in terms of real serious consideration. I do think it's going to get a couple of nominations in terms of, I think Andrew Lloyd Webber has written a Best Original Song for the movie. They could get in there, potentially even visual effects or production design or some of the technical categories. But if it doesn't get in early enough, it may sort of just won't have enough time to pick up momentum to get those Oscar nominations. Not enough people would have seen it. There's a lot of things that would affect its chances, but not making that Globes deadline could be crucial in terms of killing the Cats movie. Now jumping over into sort of the topic of the day, which is the clear frontrunners. I'm not going to go through every category and list clear frontrunners, because there's not really clear frontrunners in any category. I mean, really, if I'm being honest, the Oscar race can change so much. We're so early on. For me, even to say, this is a front runner and a clear one that sort of doesn't have a lot of competition is maybe, ignorant. And I'm sure when the nominations come out and one of these things don't get nominated, you'll come back on this video and let me know, of course. But as of right now, these are films I do feel confident in. At the very least, will get a nomination, but I also believe that these are films that will get a win as well. So starting off with the first clear frontrunner, I'm going to go with Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is a movie about Hollywood, and Hollywood loves movies about movies. So that really helps it. I think the movie's going to be strong. I think it's going to get multiple acting nominations, with this being probably the strongest, with support, with multiple nominations. And then generally, as we've been seeing throughout the past few years, movies with lots of nominations tend to at least get one win, whether it's the surprise Olivia Colman win for something like The Favourite, or even back in 2016 with Arrival. That's a film that surprisingly just gets sound editing, but not sound mixing, because they just want to give it something. That has been happening more and more. So I think that the chances, Brad will sort of ride the wave of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood being such a great film, but then also the added factors, like I talked about in my Best Supporting Actor video, that he has very much a sort of co-lead role. He's had a great year. People really like him. He's been working for a long time. He's sort of aged out of the sort of young sort of handsome movie star role that sort of plagues someone like Leonardo DiCaprio. He's never won before. He's had a great year this year also with Ad Astra. I think this is a year for Brad Pitt, and I think his closest competition, Al Pacino, is sort of getting brought down because Joe Pesci's joining the race as well, which may sort of split the votes between him and Joe. And then something like Tom Hanks in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I just don't believe in the strength of that film to really overtake someone like Brad. This one seems like a clear frontrunner in terms of a nomination, and if he does get in for that nomination, I think he has a good chance to win as well. Then, jumping off the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood train, I think the clear frontrunner is also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for Best Original Screenplay. So I'm going to be brief here because I'll go into more in depth of why I think it's going to get nominated next week in my Best Original Screenplay category. But essentially, Tarantino is seen as a writer. He's won twice before, both for writing. This is a movie that I think will do well. It's a movie that, is very much sort sort of melancholy and slow enough for, you know, people who don't love sort of this fast-paced Tarantino, you know, whiz kid sort of dialogue that he's been known for. It has some slower elements and more sort of retrospective, but still has enough Tarantino-esque elements to appeal to his fans. So I think that it just covers a large amount of people. And Tarantino is seen as one of the best writers in Hollywood history. So this is not, at least for a nomination, definitely should get in. Winning is going to be a little bit harder because this category can always be sort of leveraged. You know, say if Marriage Story really is becoming a Best Picture contender, maybe Marriage Story gets leveraged to eventually get in and actually get in for Best Picture, and say it takes Screenplay as well, because Baumbach is also an acclaimed writer. But I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, after seeing both films, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has more of a flashy kind of a writing style. Then another pick I want to talk about is Little Women for costume design. I think that's a clear front runner. The costume designer, Jacqueline Duran, out of all the nominees I have right now, she's the most accomplished. She's been nominated multiple times before and has won for Anna Karenina. Little Woman seems to be a Best Picture contender, so it'll have a lot of nominations, and this seems to be sort of the obvious way to reward that film being in, you know, this period piece. It's period accurate based on sort of a classic novel with all the different, you know, great ensemble characters, and each sort of character has their own unique dress and their unique sort of style, and of course there's the elegant men's suits versus the sort of big, large ball gowns. A lot of times in these technical categories, it's always the most amount of things. So in this category, I think there's going to be the most amount of costumes for Little Women. Now, theoretically, Jacqueline could be going up against some, you know, legendary people like Mark Bridges for Marriage Story or Sandy Powell for The Irishman. But those films, even though they have sort of the established people behind them, they don't have the obvious sort of glamour and the amount of costumes that's in something like Little Women. So I feel confident in that one. And then my final clear frontrunner I'm going to choose is The Irishman for Best Visual Effects. Now, this one is maybe my most controversial of all of them because visual effects can always be weird. Ex Machina can win one year, even though, you know, sort of like The Revenant or The Martian, or even Star Wars, you know, that was such a weird category, and then it led to a surprise. But I think that for the most part, if we look at Best Oscar history, the film that wins Best Visual Effects is either a Best Picture movie or it's a movie that has multiple nominations and sort of feels like a Best Picture movie, sort of a prestige movie. Look at last year with First Man. I was super confident in First Man, and everybody else was saying Avengers Endgame. Of course, I was right in the end because First Man had multiple nominations. Avengers Infinity War. Everyone thought Avengers Infinity War, but that only had one nomination, whereas First Man had multiple nominations, and there were no Best Picture nominees within the categories, including something like Black Panther. So, of course, you go to First Man, the movie with the most amount of support. We've seen this time and time again. When there's Best Visual Effects category has no Best Picture nominees, they go to the movie that has the most nominations. Blade Runner 2049 had the same effect. Interstellar in 2014 had the same effect. Then you look at you know, other years that have films that have been nominated for Best Picture. They always win the Best Visual Effects category too, beating out other movies with maybe more impressive visual effects or more noticeable visual effects, but still the Best Picture support counts, because if you don't know at the Oscars, the visual effects community will nominate the nominees for Best Visual Effects, but ultimately, come Oscar night, when people are voting on who they think should win, everyone votes on every category. So they're going to be having a lot of people that look at the Best Visual Effects category and will just say, oh, I like The Irishman. I haven't seen any of these other sort of space Marvel movies or whatever. I'm going to check The Irishman. So, you know, if The Irishman does get Best Picture, it's going to be, I think, within the likes of something like an Avatar, something like Inception, movies that were nominated for Best Picture that also win Best Visual Effects, just because of their relation to Best Picture. And, you know, people will say maybe Lion King and threaten that, feel confident in The Irishman, unless it doesn't get nominated like something like a Black Panther, for example. But now jumping over into the Best Director predictions, my front runner for right now is going to be Martin Scorsese for The Irishman. So, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, nearing the end of his career, making sort of his gangster opus epic. What another great opportunity to reward him with another Best Director Oscar. He has had a historic, you know, losing streak at the Oscars until he eventually won and was rewarded for The Departed in 2006. But, you know, that was 13 years ago now. So this is sort of a really great time to reward him again. This is very much a film that sort of feels like an end cap almost in his career, re-teaming with legends that he's worked before, Pesci, Scorsese, another legend, Pacino, he's never worked with before, but, they have sort of their own legacy in themselves within the relationship to the gangster genre. It's a film that is definitely not, it's different than something like Goodfellas. It's very much more meditative, and it has a streak of melancholy throughout the whole film. Which could be a distractor, but it definitely feels like more of a director's movie. It's a movie that feels in complete control, and just right from the beginning that this is, even though it's it's almost a meld of something like a Kundun and a Goodfellas into sort of the one singular film, where it has sort of the meditative effects of something like a Silence, but also has sort of the fast-paced, interesting, entertaining elements of something like a Goodfellas. And I guess a lot of people have been worried about Martin Scorsese getting in, at least in terms of maybe even a nomination, but in terms of a win, because of his statements over Marvel, he's really sort of doubled down on them, writing a piece in New York Times about it, in terms of his comments of saying that Marvel movies aren't cinema. I thought he did a good job sort of explaining himself, even though I don't completely agree with it. But that being said, I actually think this helps his chances. I think what he's really trying to fight for is the auteur. He's trying to fight for the theatrical experience, but also the type of movie that allows people and storytellers to make movies within the studio system that aren't all IP, that really do have the streak of individual expression that something like Martin Scorsese, of course, I think deserves based on an incredible career, but they're becoming more and more hard to do because of people studios want sort of a guarantee that there's going to be a guaranteed fan base that will ultimately show up using things like intellectual property, which has now become more useful than ever before. And I think Netflix is really sort of going to bank off that. It's sort of an irony kind of a thing that he wants to have the theatrical experience and protect this sort of type of cinema, yet his film is also releasing on Netflix. But actually Netflix's association with Martin Scorsese is a good thing, because Netflix was the only one to put up $150 million to support Martin Scorsese and his vision and his art. They were the only ones to do it. No other studio wanted to sort of put that narrative. And he's the champion of the theatrical experience and of film, and really pushing it in terms of the history of film. He's really sort of a godfather in sort of how he's sort of perceived today in terms of promoting film and celebrating film. So Netflix's relationship to Martin Scorsese and him sort of saying, yes, I believe in the theatrical experience. My film's getting a theatrical experience, but Netflix was the only one to actually put up the money. It really gives Netflix a good chance. But in terms of the best director category, I also believe that, like I talked about before, that they do like to split and sort of share the reward out. So if you believe in something like The Irishman's going to win Best Picture, well, I think you also think Martin Scorsese is going to get in for Best Director, because a lot of the times the sort of top two films, the top three films that are always vying for Best Picture every year, the sort of, whether it be La La Land or Moonlight, Shape of Water, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, they always sort of get their own sort of respect. I mean, look at last year with Green Book and Roma. Green Book gets picture, Roma gets director. The year before that, Shape of Water gets picture and director, but Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri gets 2 acting wins. And then the year before that, of course, Moonlight gets Best Picture, La La Land gets Best Director. So there's always sort of the split. There has been a split, and even if it's something like Shape of Water, where Best Director and Best Picture match up, well then Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri gets sort of 2 solid acting wins as well. So there's always sort of spreading that love around. And even if you looked at that year, for example, Get Out wins Best Original Screenplay, because they really liked that movie, but they couldn't find their support anywhere else, so they wanted to give Jordan Peele something, so they gave him Best Original Screenplay. So this often sort of happens where they do like to spread out the awards. So at least in my narrative, the one I'm sort of thinking about right now, I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood gets the Best Screenplay win. I think Brad Pitt gets Best Supporting Actor, and that sort of primes them perfectly for a Best Picture win. And then I don't think they're going to give Tarantino the Best Director as well, because they already gave him Best Screenplay. What's the number 2 film? The Irishman. Give it to Martin Scorsese. He's seen as more of a director, where Quentin Tarantino is seen as more of a writer. That's sort of the reasoning as of right now. But my next pick, of course, is going to be Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Even though he's seen as a writer, he is a director ultimately, and he's never won a director Oscar. He's won 2 Oscars before, but both have been for writing. And he ultimately, he's seen as the director. A writer's director, yes, and he's known for his incredible dialogue, but if they really want to reward him in terms of his legacy, thinking that this is maybe his penultimate film, they would want to reward him right now for a director nomination, or at least maybe a director win, because this is a time where we don't know if his next film is going to be great. This may be the last time to reward him. This could be the last time to reward Martin Scorsese, not, mostly because of age, versus Quentin Tarantino says he's only going to do 10 movies. This is being his 9th, so people may be sort of hesitant to being like, I don't know if his next movie is going to be that great. Let's give it to him now. But that being said, I think because he's such a strong contender in Best Original Screenplay, I think that for right now, the Best Director is going to be sort of less likely. There's still a scenario where something like Marriage Story, Baumbach wins for Best Original Screenplay, and then he wins for Best Director, and then it also gets Best Picture. And this really is sort of a commanding movie, looking at what he's sort of built his reputation around, which is loving movies in this particular time of movies, and looking at the sort of transitionary period that very much happens in 1969, but feels very relevant to today. It's also just a film that talks about a lot of things in terms of Hollywood's history and where we were versus where we're going. But maybe this is a personal reason why I'm having it at number 2, but I don't think it's just completely, absolutely floored. I don't think it's sort of a smash hit by everybody. And I think there could be a scenario where a lot of people maybe respect it and respect Tarantino's vision, but maybe a little bit bored by the movie. That's just actually a personal belief, because, not because I didn't like the movie, but especially the first time I saw it, I was really sort of, you really think it's going to be this, exciting, entertaining, fast-paced thrill ride of sort of this new Hollywood rebels in the late 60s going to the 70s, and like really going to change cinema. But it's a slow movie. It's a hangout movie. You don't really get your sort of Tarantino great set pieces until the very end. Some scenes drag on for like forever, and you don't know what the point of them was or where they're necessarily going. I don't think it's a slam dunk, loved by everyone hit that maybe will hurt Tarantino, and maybe will hurt its chances overall for best picture. But I do think that it ends in sort of a positive note that will ultimately help its chances. It doesn't make you feel like you feel terrible at the end of it. You feel sort of excited, and that last sort of 20-minute set piece is so amazing. It really ends on a high note. But it is a long movie, and there are, I think, some moments that drag, which could sort of maybe not agree with maybe some certain members of the Academy. They may not like that. But now my next pick is going to be Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. This is, of course, a South Korean film that has been sweeping the world. A huge hit in South Korea, one of the highest grossing movies in the year in that country, and other places of the world too. It's the highest grossing foreign film in the US. It's been doing really well at independent and specialty theaters, really, in North America and across the world. And it's a film that is exciting and is arguably the best film of the year, and critics love it, and audiences have been loving it, and it has sort of an evangelical fan base, I think, has been sort of promoting it, saying you've got to watch Parasite, it's so great. And recently, and even throughout Oscar history, the Oscars, in terms of the Best Director category, love foreign directors. Whether it be something like last year where Paweł Pawlikowski sort of surprises with Cold War, that's a film that, even though it's a foreign film, had Amazon behind it and really pushing it and really advocating for this film as a film that deserves to be respected, and he slips in for Best Director. And this has happened before, as I learned on my Forgotten Oscar Films categories, and that's a series of films, series of videos that I did, I learned that oftentimes the film I was looking at, it never got a Best Director nomination. Oftentimes the Best Director nomination would go to a foreign film director, someone like Ingmar Bergman, or Fellini, someone like that would get the nomination instead of the Best Picture nominee. So they've always had a history of rewarding foreign directors, and even last year with having 2 foreign directors getting in, 2 directors for foreign films getting in for Best Director last year, I think is really a sign to tell you something. But it is notable that South Korea doesn't do well at the Oscars. They just don't do well. They've nominated every single film that they've nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar has never been nominated. I mean, South Korea has never ever been nominated for Best Foreign Film, even though a lot of their films, I think, reach the U.S. audience and are mainstream in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm thinking of great movies like Old Boy or The Handmaiden. These are movies that just or Burning last year. Burning was the only film to ever make the short list for a South Korean film. I mean, most of the time they submit it and they don't even make the short list. These are sort of a weird bias against South Korean films. That it is notable, but this one seems to be also notable. It has Neon behind it, which is, yes, a young company, but they have proved themselves when they introduced the I, Tonya campaign in 2017 and did great things for that, getting ultimately an Oscar and multiple Oscar nominations. But I think that it has sort of the Neon support behind it, and Amazon supported Cold War and got multiple nominations. As a matter of fact, I'm actually more confident in Bong getting in here for Best Director than I am even for this film getting nominated for Best Foreign Film. Theoretically, it should get nominated for Best Foreign Film. Theoretically, it should win Best Foreign Film. But, we don't know just yet because for some reason there's a bias against South Korea. Who knows? But that is notable that they do like their foreign directors' films, the foreign films. This is a film that will be strong. And if it does get in here, that will really show its sort of strength as a movie, because it's probably not going to get in for best of any of the acting nominees. But there's still a chance that it, Song Kang-ho, for example, gets in for best lead actor. There is that chance, of course. But my next pick is going to be Noah Baumbach for Marriage Story. This is a film that I just recently saw and was really impressed by. It's definitely an emotional film, an emotional journey, but it definitely still feels like a Baumbach film. He's an incredible American director that's really in the prime of his career, has made great movie after great movie after great movie, whether it be Frances Ha or Meyerowitz Stories or Mistress America. He's really just done a great job at getting great performances out of people, creating realistic dialogue, and creating a unique style of his own. This is normally a situation where Marriage Story would be a film that people really enjoy, but maybe won't have the director's sort of signature stamp on it, maybe something like a Peter Farrelly for Green Book. But there's still a scenario where it doesn't, Noah Baumbach doesn't get in. And I think that could be a scenario, but not only is Baumbach going to be riding off the strength of the film, because it should get multiple nominations, it should be really well loved, because there's lots of divorced people in Hollywood. This is, of course, very much a divorce drama and very emotional. And I think someone like Laura Dern can very much win, and Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, all these people will get nominated. So it will ride the strength of the film, but also Baumbach is a director who has his own unique style. This definitely feels like a Noah Baumbach film, whether it just be the 1:6:1 aspect ratio, or just of course the incredible performances. He's worked with Adam Driver multiple times before, has a sort of unique sort of pace of dialogue that is very recognizable about Baumbach. So it has those aspects. But I also want to bring up a stat that shows that you could say that, oh, he's never been nominated before, so therefore he won't get nominated. I actually think that he's never been nominated before is a help, because a lot of times the Oscars, they like their newcomers. They don't necessarily always go with the guys that they love, which they do like to nominate those guys. Those guys always do get nominated every single year. But there's still scenarios where lots of people who have never been nominated before get in for Best Director. So looking at these stats, I've pulled up some stats here to show you the amount of newcomers each and every single year. I define a newcomer as someone who has never been nominated for Best Director before. And then, if you, just to help you guys look at your own list. So I would never sort of recommend a list of where it's all 5 people who've been nominated before or who've won before, because that could actually hurt its chances in terms of they do ultimately like sort of the new flashy thing that comes by and gets nominated. So here's the example. 2019, there were 3 newcomers. 2018, there were 4 newcomers out of the 5, so 4 out of the 5. 2017, there was 4. 2016, there was 4. 2015, there was 3. 2014, there was 2. 2013, there was 2. 2012, there was 2. 2011, there was 3. And 2010, there was 2. So looking at the past 10 years, there was quite a few 2s, but recently, 2018, 2017, 2016, all had 4 out of the 5 directing nominations were people who have never been nominated before. So when you have someone like Bong Joon-ho, that really helps his chances. Scorsese and Tarantino have both been nominated before for Best Director. So right now, at least, the nominations, you want to have at least maybe 3. You could have potentially 2. You could have 4 if you don't get Tarantino or Scorsese. But the odds are that there's never going to be a situation, I don't think, where all 5 have been nominated before or only 1 newcomer. I mean, the minimum right now, looking at the past 10 years is that there's a minimum of 2 newcomers each year. So maybe that's Bong Joon-ho and Noah Baumbach, and then the 5th slot goes to someone like a steady guy like Sam Mendes. But that is notable, you know, that Noah Baumbach, being a newcomer, actually does help his chances. It's also notable that this film, you know, I don't know Noah Baumbach personally, but it seems like this is a personal film for him. A person who's also gone through divorce before, adds that sort of personal narrative that the Academy does like. As sort of a personal, a tale, and really sort of an intimate portrait that Marriage Story does feel like one. Then my final pick is going to be a bit of a surprise pick. This category, this section always changes every single year, but it's going to be Taika Waititi for Jojo Rabbit. I've been talked about in these previous videos, so I won't go super in depth into it. That, you know, I am a believer in Jojo Rabbit. It won the TIFF People's Choice Awards. I think it's a movie that people will love and appreciate and really have a passionate fan base for, which will really help him. I talked about in the Best Supporting Actor category that Taika Waititi could get in for Best Supporting Actor, but I think the likelihood is actually him getting in for Best Director, because there has been some trends in recent years. One of them, of course, I talked about being the foreign director getting nominated, but I think the other trend has sort of been the unique style, the most directing. As we've sort of seen a split between the Best Director category and the Best Picture category, historically, the Best Picture winner and the Best Director winner always matched up. However, recent years we've been seeing splits where Green Book won for Best Picture and Peter Farrelly wasn't even nominated for Best Director. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri was a serious contender, yet wasn't nominated for Best Director. There are certain things that we have really been seeing a split ever since that preferential ballot was introduced. So this sort of most amount of directing actually helps this category. I think Taika Waititi has a unique style. He doesn't have necessarily a unique visual style. I would say maybe it's almost sort of Wes Anderson-esque, but his style is in his sort of dry, slightly dark humor. It's very much a unique style of humor that propelled something like Thor Ragnarok to be one of the best MCU movies. What We Do in the Shadows is great, and not only does he write the movie, does he direct the movie, does he produce the movie, but he's also in the movie starring as Hitler, the imaginary friend of the lead character, the boy. So I think that, you know, with directors, someone like Yorgos Lanthimos, people who have sort of these distinct styles, they like those people that really have something that's, you know, their sort of own brand. So I think that will really help someone like Taika Waititi get in. And if this film doesn't get any acting nominations, you know, the director should be sort of where the support lies, that they want to give it, you know, Best Director, because they don't really feel confident in maybe getting Scarlett Johansson Best Supporting Actress, for example, because they're going to give it to her for a Marriage Story, so they want to give their support somewhere, so they put it here at Best Director. That's my theory as of right now. But definitely things could change. There's a lot of strong contenders, and I'm not super locked in on these 5 just yet. Starting off with my first possible contender being Greta Gerwig for Little Women. Right now, it's almost weird that I'm not picking Greta Gerwig for Best Director, because theoretically she should, because I think that's going to get a lot of technical nominations, whether it be costume design, production design. I believe it's going to get 2 acting nominations in Greta Gerwig and Florence Pugh. So if it gets, you know, a bunch of technical nominations, if it gets a couple acting nominations, and it gets screenplay, then why not director? The benefit being that Greta Gerwig is seen as sort of an up-and-comer. You know, she's been nominated before. You know, she's seen as an up-and-comer, but she's been nominated before for Lady Bird. So she's still someone that's sort of established within the Academy and seen as sort of a bright new talent. She's also a female director, so if they want to sort of make a political choice and nominate her here, you know, in a category that is historically not rewarded and female directors, this could be sort of a real political choice of nominating Greta Gerwig within, as well as really loving the movie. So there's those aspects as well, but there could still be a situation where, because she's the writer director, they want to give her the best adapted screenplay, and then maybe reward here. There also could be a scenario that's not sort of overtly directed, and it's not sort of completely, you know, what's the Greta Gerwig style? Maybe that's not super defined as it is in something like Taika Waititi's work. Hard to say because I haven't seen Little Woman yet, but that is, you know, something to watch out. And then my next possible contender is going to be Sam Mendes for 1917. We haven't seen this movie, but even before, when I saw Ford V Ferrari this past weekend, there was a sort of a trailer or just sort of a featurette of Sam Mendes explaining how they shot the movie in one take and sort of the complications and how hard it was and how we were standing around and really how hard it was to film, which in a lot of ways helps a movie like this. A lot, something like The Revenant, I think Alejandro Inarritu won because it was so hard to make, similar with The Birdman, a one-take movie that was so hard to do. Except those were sort of interiors versus 1917. They sort of stress that this is outside. This is a movie that has all these outside locations, and sort of cloud continuity and how hard the film was to make. Very interesting stuff. But for right now, he's not as loved as some people think. He did win in '99 for American Beauty, but that was his only nomination. He didn't get in for other prestige movies like Jarhead or Revolutionary Road. He also feels like a director I think is maybe a DGA prime, because the directors will really love how hard it is, but maybe they won't love the movie as the Oscars maybe won't love the movie as much, but the directors will love the directing. So he gets in for DGA and he gets in for best Oscars at the Oscars. And it is notable that DGA and the Oscars almost never align for 5 for 5. The last time they had the 5 nominations of the DGA Best Director were the 5 nominations of the Oscars. We have to go back 10 years, since 2010. So, most of the times they are 4 for 5, but they're never 5 for 5. So that could be a scenario where I think Sam Mendes maybe gets in in the DGA, but then maybe someone like a Greta Gerwig or Taika Waititi slips in at the Best Oscars. Only one year where it was 2 for 5. I mean, for the most part, they're pretty accurate, so you want to use the DGAs as a tool, but I would never feel comfortable going 5 for 5 because it hasn't happened in 10 years. The Oscars still like to do, okay, we like that, but we still like to do something a little bit different, something that's, a little bit our own. We don't like to copy every single award show because I think it makes it a little bit boring for them. But that's it for my nominations in terms of what I think is going to get nominated. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think, someone like Pedro Almodovar for Pain and Glory maybe slips in as a second forward option? That's a very good possibility. We can also get in for best screenplay, so it depends on where the support of that movie lies, if it lies at all. If you really believe in that movie, and Antonio Banderas, that could really help his chances. It is sort of a reflexive movie, similar to something like The Irishman or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, maybe sort of the theme of the Oscars this year. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comment below, let me know some of your predictions and what you thought of this video. That's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.